Life often feels predictable until fate delivers the unthinkable. Some people meet their end not through crime or violence, but in accidents so bizarre they almost defy imagination. These are not simple mishaps, but moments where an ordinary routine twists into disaster within seconds. From everyday machines to familiar spaces, danger can lurk in the places we least expect. In this series, we explore some of the strangest and most unsettling accidental deaths ever recorded. You'll uncover shocking real-life accidents authorities rarely talk about. Watch closely till the last story, because the ending may leave you speechless. It was February 2019 in the Suffolk countryside, a place where life often moved at a slower pace. On Reshangle's Lodge farm, fields stretched wide, and the air was cool and crisp. For the people who worked there, it was just another day in the cycle of farming, machines whirring, animals fed, grain stored in silos that stood like silent sentinels on the property. Among the workers that afternoon was John Edwards, a man who had spent more than 6 decades of his life tending the land. At 78, he was still known for his energy and determination. To his family, he was more than a farmer. He was a husband, a father, and the steady heart of their household. That day had begun like any other, with him sharing a light-hearted moment at home, enjoying a pastry and doing his crossword before heading back to the yard. At some point later, John made his way toward the grain silo. Exactly why, no one could ever fully answer. Perhaps he wanted to check something. Perhaps it was just a habit formed from years of care for his crops. The structure, tall and echoing, was filled with tons of stored grain. To most, it looked harmless. But inside, the shifting weight of grain could be as dangerous as quicksand. When John did not return, his wife went looking for him. The house was quiet, the crossword untouched, and his chair empty. A sense of unease grew as she walked across the yard, calling his name. Nearby, a farmhand crossing the gantry above the silo noticed something odd, just a scrap of fabric, a shirt collar, peeking out from the surface of the grain. The worker rushed closer and realized in horror what had happened. John was buried beneath the grain, his body swallowed by the heavy mass, only a fragment of clothing left visible. In a desperate attempt, he dug with his hands, pulling at the mountain of kernels, but the grain kept closing in. It was like trying to empty an ocean with a bucket. Emergency services were called. Firefighters, paramedics, and rescuers arrived and fought to free him. But grain is merciless. Its weight presses in from all sides, making it almost impossible to breathe once trapped. By the time John was finally pulled from the silo, the life had already left him. The cause was traumatic asphyxia. The sheer weight of the grain had crushed his chest, leaving no chance of survival. The community was shaken. How could such an ordinary place, a silo that had been part of farm life for decades, become the setting of something so devastating? His family, heartbroken, recalled how he had been in good spirits that morning, chatting and smiling as always. No one could have imagined that by evening he would be gone. An inquest later ruled the death an accident. The silo had safety features, railings and grates, but somehow they had not been enough to prevent him from entering or falling into danger. For those who knew him, the questions remained unanswered. Why did he go in? What drew him there that day? No one could say for sure. The lesson, however, was painfully clear. Grain silos, though familiar to farmers everywhere, hold hidden dangers. To step into one is to risk being engulfed by a force stronger than most realize. It was a warning to farming communities. Even the most ordinary structures demand vigilance and respect. For Suffolk, and for all who knew John Edwards, the memory lingers. A man who spent his life feeding others, raising crops, and dedicating himself to the land, met his end within the very harvest he had devoted himself to. The silence left behind on that farm was deafening. What began as an ordinary February day ended in a loss that the countryside would never forget. If you're following these unbelievable accidents closely, hit the like button and subscribe to join us as we uncover more shocking real-life tragedies. August 20th, 2017. In the Spanish city of Seville, the Virgen de Valme hospital was carrying on with a quiet Sunday routine. Corridors echoed with footsteps of nurses, families spoke in hushed tones outside wards, and the maternity wing was filled with the soft cries of newborns. It was a day like countless others, filled with the ordinary rhythm of life inside a hospital. That afternoon, Rocio Cortés Núñez, 26 years old, had just delivered her third child. She had undergone a cesarean section, but the baby was healthy. For Rocio, exhausted but relieved, it was meant to be a joyful day. She already had 2 daughters waiting at home, and now her family had grown by one more. Relatives prepared to visit, eager to meet the newest member. In that moment, the future looked bright. After surgery, Rocio was placed on a stretcher to be moved from the delivery area to the maternity ward for recovery. Hospital porters performed this routine task many times each day. One of them guided her toward the elevators, pushing the stretcher carefully through the corridor. Everything seemed normal. The porter reached the lift. He pressed the button, and the doors slid open. He began maneuvering the stretcher inside. At that point, nothing suggested what was about to happen. As the stretcher rolled forward, the doors suddenly started to close too quickly. The automatic system that should have kept them open failed to respond. The porter tried to adjust, pulling the stretcher slightly, but in that very moment the lift jolted. The cabin began to rise, its doors not fully shut, its path not yet clear. Rocio, still strapped to the bed, had not been moved safely inside. The machine moved anyway, and within seconds, disaster struck. Her head was caught between the elevator frame and the rising shaft while the rest of her body remained below. A horrific sound rang through the corridor. The porter screamed for help. Nurses and doctors came running, some pressing buttons, others trying desperately to pry the doors open. Firefighters were called immediately. But the scene was beyond rescue. By the time emergency teams managed to stop the elevator and reach her, it was already too late. Rocio was gone. Just a few rooms away, her newborn lay safe in a crib, unaware of what had happened. In one instant, a family had gained a child and lost a mother. News of the accident spread quickly across Spain. People struggled to comprehend how something like this could happen inside a modern hospital, a place meant to protect life. The elevator, investigators later revealed, had passed a safety inspection only 8 days earlier. Officials called it a rare and unusual failure. But for Rocio's family, technical explanations could not ease the pain. Her relatives demanded answers. How could the elevator move with the doors open? Who was responsible for ensuring the machinery was safe? The maintenance company came under investigation, and so did the hospital management. Politicians promised a full inquiry, but outrage grew as more details emerged. Reports later suggested that after the incident, the memory unit inside the elevator system had been tampered with, raising suspicions about accountability. For the people of Seville, the story was unforgettable. A young mother, alive and smiling after giving birth, was killed not by illness, but by the very infrastructure meant to carry her safely to recovery. It was a nightmare born out of routine. An ordinary elevator ride turned into something unimaginable. The case remains one of the most shocking accidents in Spain in recent years. It highlights how even the smallest mechanical lapse can have devastating consequences. Behind every inspection, every button pressed, every door sliding shut, lives depend on systems working as they should. On that Sunday in 2017, in the halls of Valm Hospital, those systems failed, and a family that had just welcomed new life was forced to face unbearable loss at the very same time. It was an ordinary afternoon in late summer, warm sunlight falling gently over the small town roads of Georgia. Autumn McClure, only 20, sat in the passenger seat of her boyfriend's car. She had her sketchbook in her lap, doodling absent patterns, while the car hummed steadily along the interstate. They were on their way to pick up her little brother from daycare, a task that felt lighthearted, almost routine. Music played softly on the radio, and conversation drifted between plans for dinner and the projects she was working on for her design classes. The highway stretched smoothly before them, trucks and cars moving in rhythm, none of it seeming unusual. She laughed about something silly, an inside joke that only the two of them shared. The laughter floated in the air, unshaken, as if the moment could have lasted forever. And then, in a blink, everything changed. From the truck ahead, a heavy brake drum, a piece of machinery weighing hundreds of pounds, suddenly broke loose. It spun violently into the air, almost like a coin tossed by fate, and within seconds it came crashing back down. The object tore through the windshield of their car with a sound that didn't belong on a calm drive. Shards of glass flew everywhere, and chaos filled the space where only seconds earlier there had been light-hearted chatter. The impact struck Autumn directly. Time slowed for her boyfriend, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes wide in disbelief. The car swerved but somehow remained on the road. His voice cracked as he tried to speak her name, but her head tilted, her body fragile in the seat beside him. He kept driving, desperate to reach help, every second pounding louder in his ears. Paramedics met them quickly, but for her, the damage had been done. In less than a minute, an afternoon that began with laughter and sunlight had turned into silence that no one could undo. Back home, her family waited for her arrival with her younger brother. They expected to see her walk through the door, smiling, protective as always, ready to help with homework and talk about her classes. Instead, the phone rang, carrying news no parent should ever hear. A task as simple as collecting a child had been interrupted by a freak accident that ended a future filled with dreams. On that highway, traffic kept moving as if nothing had happened. But in one lane, on one stretch of road, a single moment had unfolded that no one present would ever forget. The shattered glass, the broken metal, and the abrupt silence told a story that left everyone who saw it shaken. For the people who loved Autumn, that piece of machinery was not just debris. It was the line between a normal day and a life-changing tragedy. These stories remind us how ordinary moments can turn deadly in an instant. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon. You won't want to miss the shocking stories we have coming next.